Okay, welcome to another episode of Driven, the Road to Peak Performance with myself, Gino Rufino, and as always, Coach Sheila Tan. And, this episode is really a special one. It's something that I think when we put this show together, this was kind of like along the path of where we wanted to go, where we wanted to see where the show would evolve to. And because here in the Philippines, like I suppose many other places in the world, there are a lot of people who start up their own businesses. It's like the land of entrepreneurs.
Yeah.
From the sari-sari stores onwards, upwards, right? So, of course, we're going to learn a little bit more about that. We're going to learn a little bit more about how to start a business, when the timing is right, and so on and so forth, with our very special guest today. Of course, we have the founder and managing partner of Capwa Capital. Welcome to the program, Maria Odiamar Racho.
Thank you, Gino.
Welcome.
Thank you, Sheila.
Okay, so let's get things started here. Like, before anything, what exactly is Capwa Capital?
Yes. So Capwa Capital is an angel syndicate that invests in underserved founders, usually on startups that are early stage on a venture capital path.
Okay.
U.S. based companies. And when we talk about underserved, that's women, minority communities, immigrant, rural areas.
When you say angel syndicate, what does that mean?
Yes. So an angel syndicate is a group of angel investors. And we have a large community, and our investors go from what I say angel curious to angel serious, and everything in between. We do education and community building to try to bring more angels into investing in these startups.
So it sounds like it's when you enter an episode of Shark Tank, and then there's people pitching ideas to Mark Cuban and so on and so forth.
Right.
That's kind of, that's the angels that you're talking about.
Yes. Those are much more sophisticated angels, but yes, exactly that.
Okay.
All right. And so give us your thoughts around creating this Capwa Capital. What was the intention in doing that?
Yeah. So I had originally gone on a path of starting a venture fund. Early in that path, I realized it was very difficult to fundraise. The market was quite challenging, and I met amazing women executives, people from underserved communities, that they were accredited investors, but just didn't really know how to put their dollars towards anything other than maybe their 401k or stocks.
Right.
But they really believed in being able to empower entrepreneurs with investment and to be able to follow along with their journey. And so that's why I decided to start Capwa Capital, is I wanted to open doors on both the funder and the founder side to be able to build generational wealth.
How long have you been doing Capwa Capital?
So Capwa Capital started at the end of 2023. We're in the middle of our 8th investment right now. And our companies go from Fila Manila, which is a CPG brand that wants to be the Filipino Goya brand in the U.S., meaning the mainstream Filipino product. He was on Shark Tank, amazing Filipino founder, to a robotic smoothie bar that creates fresh smoothies from a vending machine, to a biotech company. Again, another Filipino founder who's really making waves in the mass spectrometry space. So a wide range, but our thesis is really focused on the underserved founders.
So since 2022, and before you founded Capwa Capital, this was not where you were thriving before.
Right.
So what did you do before this?
Yeah, so prior to Capwa Capital and prior to me getting into venture, my background was mostly in corporate. I had sales roles and IT, and then I found my way into what's called organization development within the company. And
OD.
Yes, OD.
Okay.
OD is the acronym for it. And what OD is in a corporate world is we work with our C-suite around any type of strategic change. It could be a new operating model, a new strategy, culture change. And so we work with our executives, around those types of business transformations.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify that because in OD terms, for I guess a lot of viewers out there, listeners, it means totally different
Right.
with most people out there. But of course, we needed to at least hammer that home before we progress with this episode. How long were you doing that for before you went on your own?
Yeah, so I was doing that for 14 years. We were working with our business transformations, meaning, like it's a Fortune 100 insurance company that I worked at. We were going through a digital transformation, and I was part of the team and leading those efforts. In my time while I was there, I started to work with one of our first internal startups. And it was a new company that was being incubated within the company. And I was with the president, finding myself trying to navigate a 90-year-old company where they were being told, you're a startup, you have freedom, go innovate. But they felt like it was act of Congress to try to change strategy.
Okay.
And so being able to find a way to allow this innovation to thrive in this legacy company, we went outside to what startups were doing, and there's a methodology called Lean Startup. So we were going to these startup weekends with all these entrepreneurs, and I just fell in love with like the pace and the drive and the boldness of these entrepreneurs. They operated in just a different way than what I was used to in corporate. And so while I was working with that client, there were a number of us that just fell in love with this new way of bringing ideas forward, new ways of just challenging status quo. And we started an internal employee resource group, and it was called Entrepreneurs at Allstate. Allstate was where I worked. And that became the corporate incubator. Like it grew to 800 employees. We started running our internal Shark Tanks and startup challenges, and we were building capabilities internally, with like frontline claims adjusters, frontline customer service people that had ideas because they heard of the customer irritants, but they didn't know what to do with those ideas. There were no pathways. So we built that internally. And that became their corporate incubator where grassroots innovation would be nurtured. And I just continue to just fall in love with this, founder mentality and like this agency, personal agency people would take with taking their ideas and running with it. So I pitched myself a role into finance, and I moved into finance, and I worked with any startups that wanted to work with our corporation. And so day to day, I was working with accelerators and with these companies. It was at that time that I began to, I had a mentor who was a VC, venture capitalist, which is like the Shark Tanks, but they're kind of like have larger funds, those investors. And, she, like my mission at that time was really to take all of this that I was learning and apply it to some of the work that was a calling for me when I was younger to the Philippines. And so this is kind of like to go backwards. Maybe I could go into this a little later, but this kind of drew me to the shift that I started to make, which was starting to get into angel investing. I wanted to learn how to empower individuals to create ecosystems that can nurture entrepreneurship. And I wanted to understand what the investment side of it was. And so I had a mentor that I had met who was teaching me about the investment side. And when she realized what I wanted to do, she said, rather than creating these ecosystems myself and starting from scratch, had I ever considered investing myself? And at that time, it wasn't something that I had thought of, but it sat with me, and I kept asking myself, well, why not me?
Yeah.
Why not me to be the investor, to be the one to be able to deploy capital, to be able to facilitate, helping these companies. And so I, took the leap, and I started to write my first small angel checks. I started to learn more about VC.
While still employed with
While
All
still
Star.
employed with Allstate.
Oh, okay.
Yes, and I was very supported since I was in finance.
Yeah.
They were interested in saying, "That's fantastic. Keep us in the loop. Tell us when you make your first investments." And then I got into a VC accelerator, and as I was wrapping that up and ready to launch, that's when I decided to take the leap, and I decided to focus on it full time.
What was the deciding factor for you before you took that leap?
So, what I started to see was I had such a contrasting experience in my corporate life versus my startup and investor life. So during the day, I was in large meetings. You know, sometimes we were debating, you know, aesthetics on a slide, and there were several of us, right? And at night, I would be meeting, you know, a lot of founders that were here in the Philippines. I would be meeting with solo founders trying to solve global supply chain on their own.
Yeah.
And their boldness and their courage, you know, the more I kept experiencing that, the more just like the incongruence was unbearable.
Yeah.
And, you know, and I also, I've been working on business transformation. And, you know, and as I saw these startups really changing like the path of, you know, of industries, changing the path of like communities, I saw that they were really the future. And I wanted to bring those skills and that capability and as well as the capital to those startups, because for me it was like I had the ability to change the future today.
Wow.
Yeah. You mentioned the incongruence, and I think a lot of our viewers will be able to relate with that. Speak about that a bit more. What was incongruent within you?
So my corporate career was almost 3 decades.
Wow.
And, you know, as I would think about the tireless hours and weekends and days and projects, you know, that I would put my effort to, it became more and more frustrating that I couldn't put it towards these people and these efforts that were really inspiring me and that I felt was more of my calling. And when I thought about, you know, projects that I was working on previously or things that I really like, you know, didn't go to family parties or to, you know, life events or or like impacted my own health with, because I was prioritizing work above, you know, all things. I couldn't even remember some of the projects that I had worked on, you know, and I thought about like the significance. Where am I putting my time? Where am I putting my energy? And where do I want to put that energy and time moving forward? And so that was like the incongruence and the like frustration that was building, you know, enough for me, and to have gotten into this VC accelerator that was very, they only selected, you know, a handful of the thousands that were applying. And to have gotten into that and to be able to make top decile of that and to know that there was this other pathway that could accelerate me towards the impact I truly wanted to make, I think that gave me the confidence to finally make that decision.
And the impact that you wanted to make was?
And the impact that I want to make is really, truly empowering people that are, you know, set to change the world.
And for you, that felt more meaningful than debating about the aesthetics of the slide.
Right. Yes. And personal agendas and, you know, corporate politics and, you know, and transformations that almost felt as though they reset itself,
Yeah.
you know, every decade versus really having meaningful impact.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you mentioned also that it took you 30 years, right?
Yeah.
You've been there 3 decades. I guess it's when you're there that long, you have the comfort, the security
Yes.
of being in the corporate world.
Yeah.
That it's for most people when they reach 30 years, they'll be like, oh, let's just continue. What's
Yeah.
another couple? What's another?
retire.
Yeah, let's
Right.
retire. Here.
Right.
Right, and that's it. It seems like a lot of people are stuck there.
Yes.
They're going through the motions of day-to-day activities in the corporate world, but that wasn't enough for you. You wanted something else. You wanted
Yeah.
something different. What were the struggles there in that corporate lifestyle for you? That was, I guess, night and day compared to what you're doing now.
Yeah, yeah. And I think this this is where I'll go back a little.
Yeah.
Because I was born here in the Philippines. I was born in Manila. I was here for 2.5 years, and then joined my parents a year after they migrated to Chicago. Was the only of our family to, our family was the only of our
Bigger clan,
immediate family,
yeah.
our bigger clan, to go there and to grow up there. Coming to the U.S., what my parents were advised were not to speak the language, not to,
Meaning
eat the-
Filipino.
meaning Tagalog, yes, and not to do the things that are cultural because it'll allow me to be more comfortable.
To assimilate more.
To assimilate,
Yeah.
exactly. And so it worked, 6 months into it, I was eating McDonald's. I was, I said, Nanay, Tatay, can I just call you dad and mom? And I was speaking the language. But what I realized is that became my pattern, through my adult years. I would find myself incorporated team building activities. When they talk about what was your favorite thing growing up, and I couldn't remember, I would just say whatever the person before me said. And it wasn't until there was work we were doing in the company that was around inclusion. And I was a change agent during that time. I was in the OD field. This was some of the work that the OD practitioners were doing with the company, and it was about really getting connected to myself and understanding who I was, what my drivers were, what my differences were, embracing them. And I'd never really had those reflections or conversations before. And in that same year, I came back to the Philippines for the first time as an adult.
And how old were you then?
I was much older. I had a 17-year-old son.
Okay, so much older.
Yes,
Then 2.5, yeah.
Yeah, and I was a youth advisor, and I was doing a leadership workshop with some of our scholarship recipients in the Philippines and our youth from the U.S. And I realized kind of what really struck of just different perspectives. I had them do a perspective exchange. I asked them, what are the pressures that you're going through, and let's share that first by geography, and then let's share that as a larger group. And my youth in the U.S. were like, the pressure from my parents, which college I'm going to go to, peer pressure, and just natural things that that young people go through. And then we asked our scholarship recipients, what's the pressure that you deal with? And it was corruption, global warming, fighting to go to school. One of the young women, she was a daughter of farmers, and she was fighting for her education to be able to go to school. She was the eldest though, and was being asked to, help with the farm, take care of your siblings. But our scholarship allowed the opportunity for her to be able to go to school, but then still help with the farm afterwards. And it not only shook my young people that from the U.S., wow, what are we complaining about?
Yeah.
Yes. But it shook me because I realized this is a whole perspective I never even thought about, And then we were doing relief efforts because there was in our region in the Philippines, by Mayon, there was an eruption, then a typhoon, then a mudslide. And so we were there, doing some relief efforts. And I was just struck by just the beauty of our people and how they were like, we're alive, we have each other, that's enough, we'll just rebuild, And I was and the ingenuity of what they were, creating, and some of the crafts that they were offering and things like that. I kept saying, why not invest in them? There's entrepreneurial opportunities, And I when I came back, the response I kept getting was, the jobs are in the BPOs. It's too difficult to, invest in these kinds of opportunities. So I came back feeling so helpless, but for me, it reinforced why I wanted to continue the path of OD, because I wanted to hone my ability around systemic change. And so, I had just made a career change. I went back for my master's program at Pepperdine.
Yes.
And that was kind of my start. So for me, the driver to actually like put that application in a very demanding school where I thought, I don't think I'll get in, was because I feel like there's a calling that I need to do work in the Philippines and I don't know what it is. But I need some skills to build it,
Yeah.
And so that was my career shift into OD, where I continued to just hone my ability around systemic change. And so when I think about like what, gave me the courage to finally take the leap, for me, what started to refine as my mission was I wanted to create self-sustaining incubators in the poorest areas of the Philippines that mobilizes local networks. And that was like what had become clearer and clearer on my path. But I didn't know how to get there and I didn't know what to do. I didn't know where to start. And when I met my mentor, she was the one that was giving me guidance. Go and research, what are the best incubators and accelerators in the Philippines? Go and do this. And then she was the one who said, so you'd be starting this from scratch. Have you thought of investing yourself? And that was kind of like the shift that I made.
Right.
And then I saw this as a faster path. Like if I could, hone my ability in investing, if I could, mobilize others in being able to invest and put their dollars, towards empowering these entrepreneurs, then we could actually help multiple incubators. We
Right.
can have multiple partners. There's, amazing organizations already established here that are doing things in the community.
So,
I was going to say though,
Yeah.
before we proceed, I know we've mentioned OD a couple of times now.
Yes.
Yeah.
Can you define that a little bit more about
Sure.
what OD is and what a little bit of a brief history about it?
Yeah. So organization development, if you think about like organizations and companies are living systems. They all run with people that are mobilizing and organizing and, and delivering products and making things happen. Organization development is like the design and care and nurturing of that living system. So if you think about it, like you go to the doctor on an annual basis, right? To just do a checkup,
Yeah.
comprehensive, assessment. That's a way that you could utilize organization development to look, are the systems aligned? Is the structure really enabling the strategy? Are the processes supporting the structure? Are the people's capabilities in line with where we're headed as a company? Are the rewards rewarding, what we want to accomplish the strategy?
Yeah.
And so, organization development is a way in working with organizations for them to be as sustainable and healthy as it scales or as it grows or as it changes.
Okay.
So it sounds like it's a systemic perspective.
Yes.
How would you say is it different from how normal business leaders will just see business without the OD lens?
So business leaders, I would say the most effective business leaders are ones that also are OD
Right.
competent, like
Right.
that also have that ability to understand like themselves as leaders,
Yeah.
how they impact their culture,
Right.
how they engage their people, how they organize, that's not often what we're taught in school.
Yeah,
It's a more like specialized field
Mm.
because you're learning about a certain industry or a certain function of like marketing or finance.
Yeah.
And so, we tend to specialize in those areas. And so that's where like leaders being able to develop themselves as leaders, as more conscious leaders, and also, understanding how their systems work.
And
helps
how
them to
about
be more effective.
How about leaders who are incompetent at OD, who don't have that lens? How will it be different from those who are competent at OD?
Yeah, so I would say like emotional intelligence is like one lens in organization development. And organization development is a number of disciplines. It's not just like the human resource or human capital, but it's also strategy, economics, and understanding how these different factors like affect a business and affect their organization. And so I would say leaders that don't have that competence or awareness yet are short-sighted in what they can see, just
Yeah.
because of that's what they've been trained with.
Yeah, so more
and has
narrow.
a more narrow
Yeah.
view versus a more holistic and systemic and long-term view.
Okay.
Yeah,
So it sounds like the leap for you started with that mission,
yeah,
that calling, you said. And back then you said you couldn't articulate it yet.
right.
Are you able to articulate the calling now?
I'd say it's still evolving, and I would say even as my path on this investment journey has deviated, like my initial thesis as a fund was the Philippines. But when I came here for the first time and I learned about, like the maturity level of the startup ecosystem, it and just the complexities, I realized there's so much more I have to learn about business, how business operates here.
In the Philippines?
In the
Yeah.
Philippines, yeah. And as a new emerging manager, there were just too many risks and unknowns for me to kind of jump into. So that's where I went a different path. Yeah. But I do think that like what's happening is that it's still kind of it's like the universe continues to bring me back to that. So I do believe in, maybe in the work that we're doing today with like our maturity model and working with social entrepreneurs, maybe it's coming back to that.
Yeah. And your intention for the Philippines, at least the entrepreneurs here, would be?
To be empowered and have the infrastructure to be able to grow and to bring their ideas to life and to innovate. I think Filipinos are the most innovative, peoples in the world,
Yeah.
and I think it's I think there's so much human potential that could be really like unleashed and can really benefit the country and the people.
There's certain I don't know if we've if this has changed already through in the past, but I know for businesses to grow in the Philippines, for foreigners to come in to own businesses, it's still quite difficult.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's still quite difficult with the laws that we have. For example, to own land in
Real
the
property,
Philippines,
yes.
you have to for property in the Philippines.
Yeah.
It can't be a fully foreign
Body.
name, all right,
Yeah.
or body
Yeah.
name person. It has to be like a corporation with locals.
Yeah.
I don't know. I mean, is that a little bit of a hindrance with doing a little bit more of what you're doing here in the Philippines?
Yeah, I think there's that, and there's also general infrastructure.
Right.
When I was working with my partner, she was Korean, and it gave me insights into like the Korean infrastructure and ecosystem. And as we spoke with a number of startups, we'd ask them, "Where did you get your seed funding from?" And it was the government. And and like
Wow.
the systems that they've developed, it's just their machine that could
Yeah.
commercialize and scale anything.
Wow.
Yeah, and it made me just see the opportunity. If we could better systematize,
Right.
develop some efficiencies, and really create a supportive infrastructure for startups, our innovations could scale.
Right.
And we need more models, of companies that are growing and scaling, and that are supported in that way.
Okay. So let's I guess break it down a little bit further. Like
Yeah.
for the people out there who's again watching and listening, they have an idea, right? They have an idea. I want to start doing this. So whatever it is that they want to do.
Yeah.
How do you know, or how would they know that they're ready to start a business with that idea?
Yeah. So what I would say is start with a problem to solve. So what's most important and why, from a startup perspective, that most startups fail is they start with the solution. So start with a problem that you're trying to solve that people would pay for. And with that, you know, pay attention to where there's a big gap or opportunity that needs to be filled. And that's where I would say to begin is start with problems that need to be solved. Are there enough people that are out there that were willing to pay and will want that problem solved for themselves? And then what is the solution, and what is it that you uniquely bring to that solution that could be a differentiator?
So say I want to be an entrepreneur and I have this, what sounds like a brilliant idea in my mind, right? How do I know if it's enough to start a business and to scale it up?
So if there's a perspective of like what I experienced coming from corporate, I do believe that there are entrepreneurs there that want to be entrepreneurs. I would say it's okay to have a parallel path for a while. You know, it's okay to have a steady paycheck and like a side gig where you're exploring and testing, you know, because this requires a lot of testing, right? It's very risky. You know, if you've had an established career, that means others may be depending on you as well. So when you are testing your concept and you're testing that it truly is a problem, and I truly can fill a gap. You know, there are entrepreneurs that what they're making in their side gig is getting to a comparison to what they're making in their corporate. That could be your leap, right? And it's going to be different for each person. Each person's situation is different. But that's one way to consider it. I'm a big fan of, you know, if you're adding value in a company and you're getting a paycheck and you're able to nurture your entrepreneurial spirit and start to grow a business, fantastic, you know.
And by testing, you mean start small scale,
Yes,
right?
start small scale.
Yeah.
You know, test that it resonates with people. People
there's a
actually
market.
buy it.
Yeah.
Yes, there's a market. You know, you can innovate on like, you know, design of your solution until, you know, you're ready. And again, it's going to be different for each person.
Right.
Yeah. If you're an entrepreneur, you know, there's entrepreneurs that are always on to their new venture.
Yeah.
You know, I would say when you're like a readiness for scale, again, there's not a secret formula. But what I would say is think about what your like longer term vision for, you know, if you've like come up with something that this is truly a gap in a market and, you know, in a solution that I could develop, to be thinking about like what your long-term path for that is. And this might be, you know, like, again, it's a very, like, you have to feel your way through this. But for entrepreneurs that are wanting to, like, run with a venture that is like a venture backable company that's trying to get to a 10x, you know, or a 100x kind of exit, you know, you might be doing a number, experimenting on a number of different concepts until you hit something that's really special. And that is like when the market's speaking to you and, you know, and you see that it has potential to like run and scale, you know, then you'd be thinking about like, what's your capital strategy? But that gets into a whole nother, you know, kind of pathway.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And for you, what was the decision point? When did you say, I'm ready to take that leap?
The decision point for me was, you know, like what I saw as missed opportunity by not focusing on my investment and the startups, and you know, the majority of my time going into a 9 to 5, and it just felt like a loss of opportunity. And so far into my like career already, you know, I felt like, you know, I need to make the decision now and I need to move fast. And so that's why, you know, like taking the leaps into making investments and taking the leaps into just like traveling and meeting and, you know, finding partners. I kind of feel like I have to catch up because, you know, like my runway is not as long as someone that's early in their career.
I was going to ask has there been any regrets?
I would say, like the regret of not taking the leap sooner.
Okay.
I would say that for sure is the number one. You know, I mean, it's a terrifying journey.
Sure.
Like entrepreneurship, you know, you don't have anyone to kind of like, you know, default to, or like you're the one that's making your own calls and, you know, charting your own path. But I've never felt more alive. In this short period of time, I feel like I've had like 4 or 5 careers and businesses and journeys that, you know, I just can't explain. It's like I've lived a lifetime in these last few years versus like, you know, the 30 years that it's just not comparable.
And that alone makes it worth it for you.
That alone makes it worth it. And it makes it worth it when I see the, you know, angels that are writing their first checks. And the founders that are like growing and scaling, you know, to the next level. Our very first investment as Capwa was at a pre-seed. It was the robotic smoothie kiosk. They didn't have one in production yet, or they didn't have one live. It was just their kind of like test machine. We invested, and then we just did a follow-on investment. It's only a year and a half. It's already 2.5x. And they're scaling. They're getting 100 machines out. So like to see the growth of those companies, and you know his mission is to be like the healthy Starbucks, because he said he wants to see healthy options just as much as there's a Starbucks on every block. You know, and to be on their journey is really amazing. You know, to grow from like, you know, 5 employees to now he's like, you know, 30. That's you know, that's really priceless, I feel, for me.
That's the reward.
Yes.
Yeah. I'm sure there's if there's people out there that want to take that leap but are a little bit more afraid, right?
Yes.
Obviously, there's the safety net is not there.
Right.
I mean, if they want to learn more about what it is that you guys do, what it is for maybe OD and whatnot, how do they go about doing that?
Yeah, so they can, you know, look at our website. We have a blog where we try to do education and share what we're doing. You can see our portfolio companies. And so www.capwacapital.com. You could follow me on LinkedIn. I'm happy to make connections. You know, our team is always supportive to talk with founders. You know, whether we're able to invest or not, we look to help at least, you know, help you take one step forward.
Right.
Right. So that could be a connection. That could be through feedback. And so those are ways to get a hold of me.
And what's next?
So I'm excited that my a partner and I, who we have been on this startup journey together, he from like an executive coach perspective, and then me from like an investor and you know, OD consultant perspective, and we realized that there's a gap in resources and support. Most things that support on culture and operating models and things like that are more for established companies.
Right.
There's been a gap for startups, and so we are trying to help fill the gap by, you know, creating resources, and we've developed a model that we think can help companies scale in a healthy, sustainable way, and we think it could be used as common language for investors and founders and ecosystem builders, so that they can understand the journey and like the growth of the company and what they're going through systemically.
Yeah, and to scale sustainably.
And to scale sustainably, yes. Yeah.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right.
Yeah.
Thank you, Maria.
Thank you very much, Maria. I mean, that's especially in a country like the Philippines. Again, as we mentioned at the top, that it's a land of entrepreneurs.
Yes.
It's a lot of small businesses that are trying to make it, and with people like you and your group that's out there to help them along the way, I'm sure that's something that can hopefully be, you know, can make systemic change as well.
Yes.
All right.
Looking
Thank
forward
you
to being
very
on
much. All right, ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for watching and listening to another episode of Driven, the Road to Peak Performance. My name is Gina Rufino. Her name is Sheila Tan. Coach Sheila Tan, sorry. I want to say that again. Coach Sheila Tan. And of course, Maria, thank you for guesting. All right, till next time.